Hey everybody, welcome back to Vegas Weekly for Saturday, August the 6th, 2022. Before we get started on today's topic, I did want to remind you all that we have a kind of an abridged schedule of programming coming up this following week. As I've mentioned a couple of times, I am going out of town early Monday morning and won't be back home until probably late in the day on Thursday. So there will not be a podcast this week, and we will not have a regular Vegas tips and tricks show on Tuesday and Thursday. However, from our most recent under the radar trip to Las Vegas, we did record a couple of videos, and I'm going to upload those videos on Tuesday and Thursday for your viewing enjoyment in place of our regular program. So I think one of them people will really enjoy. The other one, it was kind of interesting, and I thought it might be fun to share it with you all. So that's coming up this week. We will be back next week as usual with our regular Vegas Weekly program. Okay, so this week we're going to talk about renting a car in Las Vegas. And it's a topic that I don't normally spend a lot of time on. It's a topic that comes up from time to time, certainly when people are asking about getting around. Frequently, people ask about whether that's the best way to sort of get around, whether it's the least expensive way to get to and from the airport. And so I did want to talk about it a little bit today. So we'll cover, first off, the topic of whether or not you need to rent a car in Las Vegas and for how long. We'll talk a little bit about the logistics of car rentals in general. We'll talk about the car rental facility in Las Vegas, and we'll talk a little bit about some tips for getting around Las Vegas and for getting the most out of your rental car. Okay, so first off, when you come to Las Vegas, do you need to rent a car? The answer is probably not, and particularly so if it's a first trip or first trip in some time. Unlike a lot of cities where the attractions are spread out over the entire metropolitan area, most of what you're going to want to see in Las Vegas is located on the fabulous Las Vegas Strip or in the downtown area. Within those particular tourist districts, a lot of things are going to be walkable. You can take a cab, you can take a bus. It's not that expensive to get around as long as you're not, traveling back and forth all the time. That being said, if you want to visit some of the attractions outside the city or in the outskirts of the city, or if you're staying at a property off the strip quite a ways, then a car may very well be a very good choice because the cost of Ubers and Lyfts and other forms of transportation just to check out some of these areas or to travel back and forth to the tourist areas is going to become kind of prohibitive. Now, I wouldn't necessarily normally recommend people to stay off strip on a first trip either, but if for some reason you are, then a car is probably going to be to your advantage. The other thing to think about when it comes to renting a car is, do I need to rent a car for the entire duration of my trip? Again, typically that's kind of the way people think about it. You go to the airport, you pick up the rental car, you keep it for the entire time you visit the city, and then you return it right before going to the airport. Of course, that does give you the advantage of essentially free airport transportation, even though it's not free. But at the same time, it may mean that you're paying for days that you rent a car when you don't really use it that much. So if you can think about, setting an itinerary, if you want to, say, visit Hoover Dam, if you want to go to Mount Charleston, if you want to go out to the Red Rock area or Summerlin, if there's things you want to do around the valley that simply aren't very accessible from, cabs, buses, Ubers, then maybe rent a car just on those days. If you decide you only need a car for a day or two during your trip, you might consider renting it through your hotel. And it's not always that well publicized, but almost every single hotel on the Las Vegas Strip and many of the ones downtown actually have a car rental facility. Now, it's going to vary. It's not going to be multiple car rental facilities. But for example, recently I rented a car at the Luxor. In that case, they have an Avis facility on site. So definitely check into whether your hotel or wherever you're going to be staying has a car rental facility on site, and then you don't have to worry about the airport. In fact, you can avoid paying some of the airport fees. Another thing to consider when considering renting a car is that a lot of people like to indulge, sometimes overindulge in alcohol or other intoxicants when they're on vacation. And so if you're doing that, the car is going to be, more of a liability than something that's going to help you out, unless you have a designated driver or something like that. But you certainly don't want to be drinking and driving in Las Vegas. That's a really bad idea. A lot of people get hurt, and a lot of other people end up in jail. Now, if you do decide you're going to rent a car during the entirety of your trip, you're probably going to want to pick it up at the airport. And the car rental facility in Las Vegas is not at the airport proper. It is at a facility at 7135 Gillespie Street, which is probably about 3 miles or so, maybe a little further than that, south of the airport. Now, the good news is that pretty much all of the major car rental companies are represented at this site, so you don't have to figure out where to go for any particular car rental. And also, there's a free shuttle that picks up right in the baggage claim area where all the other transportation options are, and they can take you right down to the facility. The shuttle runs pretty much constantly 24 hours a day, so no matter when you're arriving, when you're leaving, you'll be able to take advantage of that. Now, you can take some luggage on there if need be, but if you have like multiple people and you might just send one person down to pick up the car and just leave the rest of them in the airport proper, so you're not like clogging everything up. Again, most all of the major car rental facilities are represented there. But some of them may not if you rent through kind of an alternative or a somewhat less known car rental facility. You'll want to contact them. A lot of them will actually have a shuttle that picks up at the car rental facility to take you to the site. So there's an option right there. Now, it's pretty easy to get from the car rental facility to the airport, to the Strip. It's located very close to I-215, I-15, and just a short distance away from the Strip itself, just a little bit, just have to go a little bit west to hit the main Strip area. So it's not too hard to get around once you do get your vehicle. If it's super busy, you might wait a while, but normally it goes pretty quickly. Of course, finding the right price for a rental car can be a trick, and car rental prices have been going up over the past few years in Las Vegas. It used to be a really inexpensive place to rent a car, not so much anymore. Now, finding the best deals, who knows? There's some pretty good websites that kind of compare and contrast a lot of different options. I've used AutoSlash on a few occasions, so I think they're worth checking out. If you already are part of a car rental loyalty program of some sort, whether it be Budget or Hertz or whatever, it may very well be to your advantage to go ahead and utilize that. If you've rented frequently from a certain company, you'll eventually accumulate sort of loyalty points that'll help you out. And, you're probably more likely to be able to get in and out of the rental facility rather quickly. Just some things to keep in mind there. If you haven't rented a lot of cars, you might check with, for example, your credit card companies, with any other travel-related sites that you do business with, to see if there's any crossover there. Because a lot of times, whether it be a hotel loyalty program or a credit card, you're able to earn points towards those things just by renting a car from the right company. Of course, if you're like me, the confusion of renting a car just gets even more confusing when they start asking you about various insurance options, this kind of waiver, that sort of waiver. I think, by the time, if you clicked on all of the successful waivers, you'd probably double or triple the cost of the rental. And, I'm sadly, I have to admit that I have at times been just sort of frightened into being like, yeah, I guess sure, I'll take this insurance just to cover myself. But if you do a little legwork in advance, you can probably avoid some of those charges. Most credit card companies do cover some of the same things that are covered by those damage waiver programs. Just be sure, and check with your particular issuing company to see what they cover. Some of them do not do a very good job of covering sort of lost time issues. So they may go ahead and cover the cost of any sort of repairs, but you may still be liable for the time that particular vehicle was out of service. So check into those things. A lot of times you either can already have a credit card or probably could get a credit card that would help you avoid a lot of those fees. And those fees are what often make up the biggest cost of a car rental and also probably the biggest profit for the car rental companies. Now, what size vehicle should you consider renting? I would say rent the smallest vehicle that is going to work for you. Obviously, if you got a family of 5 or 6, you can't chance, a Toyota Yaris or something. But, if there's just 1 or 2 of you, I would say rent the least expensive option. A lot of times you'll be upgraded automatically without any cost at all, or there'll be a very nominal fee to upgrade to a larger vehicle if you choose to do that. Of course, a larger vehicle typically going to use more gasoline, and with the price of gas what it is today, that may also be something to consider. Gas is typically pretty pricey in the Las Vegas area. It can be as much as 50 cents or $1 more than where you live. It's pretty comparable to, say, the prices in California or so. I know in my area, like a month or so ago, gas prices were probably about $4.30, $4.50. In Las Vegas, they were $5 and over. I didn't notice a lot of difference going a few blocks off the strip. So if you do need to fill the rental car up with gas before taking it back, I don't know that you're going to gain that much driving around looking for the best deal. Another thing to consider when renting a car in Las Vegas is parking fees, and until very recently, pretty much all of the hotels and casinos had free parking. That's not so true anymore. There's still a few properties like Treasure Island, Wynn, Tropicana that don't charge for any sort of parking. And, if you have any sort of status with a company like Caesars or MGM, you can normally at least get free self-parking. But if not, you could be looking at $15, $20 a day just to park your vehicle. Another reason to make sure that if you rent a vehicle, you're actually going to use it on that day. Now, Las Vegas itself is not a particularly difficult city to drive in, but there are a lot of crazy drivers, most of them renting cars, just like you, but also Ubers and taxis. It's a pretty hectic city, particularly if you happen to hit the Strip or one of the main thoroughfares around rush hour. And unlike a lot of cities, Las Vegas will have multiple rush hours because people are working 24/7, 365. Of course, your first instinct is going to be able to take your rental car up and down the Las Vegas Strip. Okay, you're gonna do it once. I'm not going to try to dissuade you. Just remember that sometimes the Strip can become essentially a parking lot, and a trip from Mandalay Bay to the Strat can take an hour or more. And if you go all the way downtown, there's been a lot of construction on Las Vegas Boulevard recently. It's starting to wrap up, but again, if it's a busy time, you're going to really spend some serious time in traffic. So be sure you are ready for that and that you're doing it for sightseeing purposes, not to get around. Now, of course, you can take the freeways around Las Vegas. I-15 is, of course, a really good, quick way. I'm not a huge fan of that freeway. It scares the crap out of me. So I like to consider some other options to the east and west of Las Vegas Boulevard. To the east, you have Paradise Road, which is the road that basically crosses by the convention center. It can also get pretty busy if there's a major convention in town or just if the city is really busy, but it's usually a much better option than Las Vegas Boulevard. A little bit further to the east, you can take Maryland Parkway, but you're starting to get kind of further and further afield when you do that. Now, on the west side of the Strip, that is where the freeway is located. It's also where the Rat Pack roads are located, and this is my favorite kind of traveling around Vegas tip or trick. Stick to Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and Sammy Davis Jr., and your trips around Las Vegas are going to go quickly, and they're going to be very relaxing. These are some of the best roads in town, 4 to 6 lanes, and for some reason there's hardly ever any traffic on them. And they'll basically take you north-south from as far down as like the Silverton, all the way until you hit Industrial and Main and head all the way downtown. So it's a really quick, easy way to get around, and it's the one I recommend if you have a chance. In conclusion, renting a car in Las Vegas can be a really good deal. If you're going to use the vehicle to get around, check out some places that you might not otherwise get to see. You will pay some fees, and you're definitely going to pay for gas, but if you do your homework, you can save some money on the rental. You can probably avoid a lot of those insurance fees just by checking with your credit card company. And if you just do a little bit of research on how to get around, your trip can be pretty enjoyable. That being said, a rental car isn't a necessity, so if it's not in your budget on this next trip, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Okay, guys, we'll be back again next week with another episode of Vegas Weekly. Until then, I hope that you have a great, lucky, and healthy week. We'll see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.